Imagine, if you will, America in the early 1920s. The Great War was over, prosperity was booming, and a sense of normalcy swept the nation. Jazz music filled the smoky speakeasies, flappers danced the night away, and the economy seemed unstoppable. It was an era of optimism, of new inventions, and of immense wealth being created. But beneath this glittering surface, a different kind of ambition was brewing, one that would expose the dark underbelly of power and greed at the very top of American government, shaking public trust to its core. At the helm of this flourishing nation stood President Warren G. Harding, promising a return to simpler times after the tumultuous war years. His administration, filled with friends and political allies from his Ohio roots, was meant to be a beacon of stability and integrity. Yet some of these appointees, cloaked in the authority of their new offices, harbored intentions far removed from public service. They saw opportunity not just to govern, but to enrich themselves through the vast resources of the burgeoning American economy, setting the stage for a monumental scandal. Among the nation's most precious resources were its naval oil reserves. These vast tracts of land, brimming with crude oil in places like Wyoming's Teapot Dome and California's Elk Hills, were set aside for the United States Navy. They were a strategic lifeline, a crucial safeguard for national security, ensuring that America's warships would always have fuel, especially in times of crisis. These reserves were considered sacrosanct, beyond the reach of private exploitation, a trust held for the entire American people and their future defense. Overseeing these vital resources was the newly appointed Secretary of the Interior, Albert B. Fall. A former senator from New Mexico, Fall was a man of considerable political experience, known for his persuasive manner and a fondness for grand living, a lifestyle that often exceeded his modest government salary. He was charming, ambitious, and, crucially, in desperate need of money to sustain his lavish ranch and political aspirations. Fall harbored a deep-seated belief that these public lands should be opened up for private development, a conviction that would soon merge with personal avarice. In a move that would prove foundational to the scandal, Fall persuaded President Harding to issue an executive order. This order transferred control of the naval oil reserves from the Department of the Navy, where they had been diligently protected, to Fall's Department of the Interior. The justification was purely administrative efficiency, simplifying oversight of public lands. But in hindsight, it was the critical first step in Fall's scheme, placing these immensely valuable national assets directly under his sole discretion, away from the vigilant eyes of naval officers. With the reserves now under his control, Albert Fall wasted no time. He began secretly negotiating with powerful oil magnates, bypassing standard competitive bidding processes. These initial discussions were hush-hush, conducted behind closed doors, away from public scrutiny and the checks and balances usually applied to such massive government contracts. Fall was laying the groundwork for deals that promised not only to enrich his cronies, but also to line his own pockets handsomely, all at the expense of national security and the public trust. The stage was set for unprecedented financial misconduct. One of the key players in Fall's scheme was Edward L. Doheny, a rugged, self-made oil tycoon who founded Pan American Petroleum and Transport Company. Doheny was a personal friend of Fall's from their days in New Mexico and possessed an insatiable hunger for new oil fields. He saw the naval reserves not as national strategic assets, but as untapped wells of personal fortune. Doheny was a shrewd businessman, accustomed to getting what he wanted, and he recognized the immense opportunity that Fall's new control over the reserves presented to him. The first major payoff arrived in 1921. Edward Doheny provided Albert Fall with a substantial loan of $100,000 in cash, delivered in a little black bag by Doheny's son-in-law. There was no collateral, no interest, and no formal repayment schedule. This was a naked bribe disguised as a friendly gesture between old acquaintances. For Fall, this influx of cash allowed him to begin expanding his ranch, paying off debts, and living the opulent lifestyle he craved, a secret fortune now fueling his decisions. Next to enter Fall's orbit was Harry F. Sinclair, the flamboyant founder of Mammoth Oil Company. Sinclair was another titan of the burgeoning oil industry, known for his aggressive business tactics and penchant for high-stakes deals. He too eyed the naval oil reserves with keen interest, eager to expand his empire. Sinclair was willing to pay handsomely for exclusive drilling rights, perceiving the vast profits to be made from oil in the post-war industrial boom. His ambition would soon entangle him in the web of corruption being spun by Secretary Fall. Sinclair quickly followed Doheny's lead, extending his own loans and lavish gifts to Secretary Fall. This included a promissory note for another $200,000, substantial herds of prized cattle for Fall's ranch, and even a secret payment for the upkeep of the ranch itself. These were not genuine business transactions, but rather a sophisticated system of bribery designed to secure highly lucrative no-bid contracts for Sinclair's company. Fall was systematically selling off national assets for personal gain, one clandestine payment at a time, solidifying his illicit alliance with the oil barons.
The core of the scandal involved the leases for two prime naval oil reserves, Teapot Dome in Wyoming and Elk Hills and Buena Vista Hills in California. Fall secretly leased these fields to Doheny's Pan American Petroleum and Sinclair's Mammoth Oil, respectively. The leases were granted without competitive bidding, which was a clear violation of government protocol. Under the terms, the companies would extract the oil and in return construct storage facilities for the Navy and provide the Navy with a portion of the oil. This seemingly legitimate arrangement concealed massive kickbacks. The secret leases were particularly advantageous for the oil companies. They gained access to proven, immensely valuable oil fields with minimal upfront cost and no competition. The terms, while superficially appearing beneficial to the Navy, were ultimately far less favorable than they would have been through an open, transparent bidding process. For Doheny and Sinclair, it was a golden ticket, virtually guaranteeing astronomical profits from wells that rightfully belonged to the American public. This behind-the-scenes maneuvering was a masterclass in exploiting public resources for private gain. As Fall's lifestyle conspicuously improved and the rumors of secret dealings began to swirl, some eagle-eyed journalists and politicians grew suspicious. How could a government official, even a cabinet secretary, suddenly afford such an elaborate expansion of his ranch, complete with new houses and prize-winning livestock? The whispers started faintly, then grew louder. A few investigative reporters and senators, sensing something was amiss, began to dig deeper, following the trail of money and privilege that led straight back to Washington, D.C. and the heart of the Harding administration. The alarm bells were first rung prominently by Senator Robert La Follette of Wisconsin and Senator Thomas Walsh of Montana. Both were progressive politicians known for their integrity and willingness to challenge powerful interests. They demanded a Senate investigation into the Department of the Interior's handling of the naval oil reserves. Despite initial resistance and attempts to downplay the concerns, their persistent efforts eventually forced Congress to act. The stage was set for one of the most explosive and revealing congressional hearings in American history, exposing secrets kept by the powerful. As the Senate investigation gained momentum, public outrage swelled. Newspapers across the nation ran sensational stories detailing the allegations of corruption at the highest levels of government. Citizens who had entrusted their leaders with national security felt betrayed. The image of a clean, honest administration was shattered, replaced by fears of graft and cronyism. This period of intense scrutiny laid bare the vulnerability of democratic institutions to personal greed and the critical role of a free press and vigilant legislature in holding power accountable, even when unpopular.
The Senate hearings proved to be a dramatic spectacle. Albert Fall, initially defiant, repeatedly denied any wrongdoing, insisting that the loans were legitimate and that his actions were for the good of the Navy. He stonewalled, obfuscated, and even feigned illness to avoid testifying fully. But Senator Walsh, a relentless interrogator, systematically dismantled Fall's flimsy explanations, revealing inconsistencies and contradictions. Each day brought new, shocking revelations, fueling the public's fury and solidifying the image of a government deeply tainted by corruption and deceit. As the evidence mounted and public pressure became unbearable, Albert Fall, under immense scrutiny, abruptly resigned from his cabinet post in 1923. His resignation was an attempt to escape the growing storm, to make the scandal go away with his departure. However, the damage was already done. His actions had irrevocably tarnished the Harding administration, and the investigations were far from over. Fall's desperate exit only solidified suspicions that he had much to hide, further fueling the determination of those seeking justice. Investigators painstakingly uncovered the paper trail, tracing the money and gifts that flowed from Doheny and Sinclair to Fall. They found evidence of the cattle transfers, the cash payments, and the sudden improvements to Fall's ranch that far exceeded his legal income. The truth began to emerge, piece by painful piece. This was not merely a case of poor judgment, but a deliberate, systematic scheme of bribery and influence peddling. The full extent of Fall's financial betrayal became undeniably clear, painting a picture of calculated greed. Tragically, President Harding, already under immense stress from the burgeoning scandals, died suddenly in August 1923, allegedly from a heart attack. His death, while unrelated to the scandal's full revelation, cast a dark shadow over the presidency. Conspiracy theories abounded, with many speculating he died from stress or even foul play to silence him. Regardless, his passing removed him from the direct fallout, leaving his administration's legacy forever marked by the Teapot Dome and other revelations of corruption that emerged during his short tenure. Upon Harding's death, Vice President Calvin Coolidge quietly stepped into the presidency. A man known for his integrity and taciturn nature, Coolidge acted decisively. Recognizing the gravity of the scandal and the urgent need to restore public trust, he appointed special prosecutors to pursue the case vigorously. His firm commitment signaled a new era, one where corruption would not be tolerated, no matter how high up it reached. Coolidge's actions ensured that the investigation, far from dying with Harding, would intensify, setting the stage for legal battles.
The subsequent legal battles stretched on for years, involving multiple trials and appeals. The government sought to prosecute Fall for bribery and conspiracy, while also attempting to invalidate the oil leases themselves. The legal proceedings were complex, with high-profile lawyers on both sides. The oil tycoons, Doheny and Sinclair, employed every legal maneuver imaginable to protect their ill-gotten gains and avoid criminal conviction, turning the courtrooms into arenas of epic legal and financial combat, watched keenly by a captivated nation seeking justice. In a major victory for the public, the United States Supreme Court ultimately ruled in 1927 and 1928, declaring the oil leases null and void. The court found that the contracts had been obtained through fraud and corruption, and therefore the valuable naval reserves were to be returned to the full control of the United States Navy. This decision was a powerful affirmation that even the highest officials could not illegally dispose of public assets, and a testament to the perseverance of justice in the face of immense power. In 1929, after years of trials, Albert B. Fall was finally convicted of accepting a bribe from Edward Doheny. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and a $100,000 fine, becoming the first ever U.S. cabinet member to be incarcerated for crimes committed while in office. His fall from grace was complete. The conviction sent a clear message. No one, regardless of their position, was above the law. It was a landmark moment for government accountability, demonstrating the system's capacity, however slow, to correct itself. Remarkably, despite clear evidence of bribery, both Edward Doheny and Harry Sinclair were acquitted of paying bribes. However, Sinclair was later convicted of contempt of court and contempt of the Senate for hiring private detectives to shadow jurors and for refusing to testify. While the tycoons escaped the most severe charges, their reputations were permanently sullied. Their ability to evade the bribery convictions highlighted the immense power of wealth and legal maneuvering, even when their complicity in the corruption was widely known and acknowledged. The Teapot Dome Scandal stands as one of the most significant and shocking instances of government corruption in American history. It not only exposed the dark underbelly of the Harding administration, but also served as a stark reminder of the constant vigilance required to protect public resources and maintain trust in democratic institutions. This tale of greed, power, and eventual justice continues to resonate today, a timeless warning that financial malfeasance, when left unchecked, can corrode the very foundations of a nation, proving that money can break any system.